Broadcasting live from Forward Observer Central Command in Austin, Texas. It's the man always out front on issues. You're listening to Out Front with Mike Shelby.
Hello and good afternoon. Welcome everybody to Out Front with Mike Shelby. This is the new afternoon show. Here's what we're probably going to do with this. I'll finish out this week live on YouTube, and I'm not exactly sure which days will be live on YouTube and which days will be for Forward Observer subscribers only, but I can tell you, well, we'll leave it at that for now. We're doing a trial run, working out some kinks, and figuring out what this daily 30-minute show is going to look like. Hey, let's go ahead and get started. If you think American politicians are uniquely bad, I was just reading about the last month in Costa Rica. They had presidential elections, a general election, and turnout was so low that nobody won the general election, and now they're having a runoff on Sunday. It's between these two dudes, one named Rodrigo Chavez. He's and let me tell you, this is how bad it is. He's an ex-World Bank official who's been accused multiple times of sexual harassment, and another guy named Jose Maria Figueres, who's an ex-World Economic Forum executive director who stepped down after being accused of taking illegal payments. In terms of a presidential election, it could be worse, but not by much. And I look at what I read that and it made me think, America is not really unique in our disdain for our politicians. It's also not unique in our particularly good or bad at politicians either. And I was just thinking, all I want, I watched this Biden press conference today where he's talking about all the work they're going to do to bring oil prices down by shifting to green energy somehow. And I just thought, I just want a president who fights for my interests. I don't want a president who fights for the interests of globalists, of internationalists, of the ruling class. I just don't feel like that's a lot to ask for. At any rate, it reminded me of this quote from, I've been quoting this book 2 days in a row now. It's a pretty good book, The Rise and Decline of Nations. I bought it because I've been studying up on stagflation, reading a bunch of books from the 70s and 80s on stagflation. This book's from 1982. At any rate, this quote is from Herodotus. And he says that the cities that were formerly great have mostly become insignificant. By the way, let me set this quote up. Herodotus is a historian, and he's talking about how empires come and go, and everything is cyclical. So this is one of the things he had to say. Quote, the cities that were formerly great have mostly become insignificant, and such as are at present powerful were weak in olden times. I shall therefore discourse equally of both, convinced that human happiness never continues long in one stay. And you think about all the empires that have come and gone. I don't mean to make this a show on empire collapse, but we absolutely are, in my opinion, I'm certain of this. By the way, I try not to use determinative statements like this is happening or will happen or has happened, because when we're talking about the future, like Kevin Garnett, anything is possible. But I feel high conviction, very strong conviction on this. We are in the period of empire collapse, the sunset of the American empire. And listen, this is a decadal process. I don't think we're just going to wake up one morning and say, well, the American empire is over. I think 20 to 50 years afterwards, historians are going to look back and say, okay, these were the defining moments. One thing that I think is helpful to do is look at these events like the Western sanctions on Russia and the United States Treasury freezing the US dollars and denominated assets that Russia has, going after the oligarchs and after everyone else. There's a couple of things here. I was reading the speech that Medvedev gave Dmitry Medvedev, Russian president, gave, or prime minister rather. Um, he said, The Americans are no longer the masters of planet Earth." And so, I read that, and there's this thing in just the Financial Times that came out this morning. Gita Gopinath, she's the deputy managing director over at the International Monetary Fund. She said, "Look, Western sanctions on Russia, particularly for the U.S. dollar, this is going to cause trade, commerce and trade to fracture among currencies." And it's interesting. She said something that I've been saying week after week on the Economic Early Warning Show, which is the U.S. dollar is going to be displaced in some regions. I think there's more likely than not going to be regional reserve currencies rather than just a single dominant U.S. dollar. But we are in the sunset of this, and so I think this period, the past month or so, has been a turning point. There's another thing here. Medvedev said. He said they'll have to negotiate a new financial order, meaning it's like the world is going to have to negotiate a new financial order. And he says that the decisive voice in the new, by the way, this is paraphrased because he strung this out among several sentences. I'm just condensing it for you. The decisive voice in the new order won't be those who endlessly inflate their public debt, issuing more and more pieces of paper into circulation, which aren't backed by national wealth. And, he's obviously calling out the United States there, and not just the United States, but the West is massively over leveraged and massively in debt. We all have, or most of us have, predominantly consumer-based economies, which are in the age of fiat, funded and expanded through debt. Pretty incredible statement there. I actually do think he's right. Before we get to some other points, there are a couple other things. Yeah, so I'm reading this book, and I tell you, it's very instructive. I've been reading about, I've been reading that Ray Dalio book I just finished, Principles for Navigating the Changing World Order. Reading some books about what happened in finance and the economy during the British collapse. They lost an overwhelming number of colonies in the 10 years that passed 1945, the end of World War II, and they lost them to independence movements because they were no longer strong enough to keep those colonies as their own. And so, I just look at the United States, and I think we're in a very similar position. And I am not at all, I forget if I told people this or not, but I was talking to my dad a couple of weeks ago about what was going on and kind of get his take on the situation. And I thought, he says, "Oh, I'm like you. I'm a pessimist." And I kind of took me by surprise. I said, I don't think I'm a pessimist. I think I'm a realist as I understand things. And if I am a pessimist, I try to be a proactive pessimist. I try to, I'll look at my community, the things that we're doing with our area preparedness network. And, some of the other things we're trying to shift around, make sure people are employed, make sure that we're preparing in the right ways for what's going to happen in the future. And I think there's nothing wrong with proactive pessimism. So maybe, hopefully I'll be wrong, but I say me, really we. A lot of people talk about this stuff. I'm not the only one by any means, but I tell you, the reason why I'm so pessimistic for the American empire at this point is because on the one hand, there actually is extreme inequality. And I used to roll my eyes when people talked about inequality because their solutions were, well, we just have to distribute wealth. And the more I have read and studied low intensity conflict is kind of an umbrella term. So it could be insurgency, popular revolution, terrorism, a few other things like protests, social movements like we saw in 2020, which is actually an attempt at a popular revolution. The more I read about low intensity conflict, the more I realize that actually wealth inequality, income inequality, economic inequality drives low intensity conflict. And we're talking about BlackRock's housing empire and the Fed driving up financial assets and driving down the middle class. They absolutely are destroying the middle class. That inevitably leads to civil unrest, and the whole attempt at building kind of building this momentum for class warfare is absolutely intended to be funneled at some point in the future. My guess is going to be the November 24 elections and into 25, funneled at a class revolution and probably a popular revolution here in the United States. And, But civil unrest is a best case scenario. That some kind of revolution is a worst case scenario. But when we look at these things, financial and economic collapses are typically the trigger. Well, I should say they're a common trigger. And so I look at Republicans, and most Republicans are defending the status quo. And then on the other hand, this is the status quo, and they are defending it. They're really not doing anything to help you or me, middle class people just trying to make it. You know why? Because their wealth's in the market, and it's, well, not recently, it hasn't been going up, but over the past 10 years, it's virtually always gone up, even goes up on bad news days. And then on the other hand, you have the left and the far left, and they want to destroy productive capital. By the way, productive capital is what creates economic expansion. That's what puts people to work. They want to take that productive capital. They want to redistribute the wealth, turn the United States into Venezuela, because their plan is going to magically work this time, because Venezuela did it wrong. And that's going to likely lead to some other type of low intensity conflict. And we can go either way with that, but a military coup, well, probably not in this day and age, probably not a military coup, but that's going to drive secession movements, right-wing death squids, and all the other things, especially in, Central and South America, that we've seen in the past, since the 60s or 70s, probably. And so that's my fear. That's why I'm somewhat pessimistic about the future of the United States, because, man, it's like both parties are just damn determined to get us into a situation like that through their policies and what they're pursuing. And they're not really looking out for us. They're looking out for them. And I guess they're getting while the getting's good. So that's kind of my rant for the day. Let's shift over here real quick and look at some new recession numbers came out. We have a new look at recession today. I just pulled this off of JP Morgan. And by the way, Ben or whoever's running the show, or Dustin, can you put that recession thing up there? Oh, yeah, it was the second image I sent you. Great. Yeah, so this is from JP Morgan. I think this is going to change. However, as of today, or maybe it was yesterday, they're predicting about a 7% chance of recession within the next 12 months. And then that's followed by about a 40% chance of recession over the next 2 years, 60% over 3, and then finally an 80% chance of recession over the next 4 years. Recessions are likely. They are cyclical. We are going to have another one. The big question is, how bad is it going to be? How long is it going to take? Can we dig ourselves out of this massive mess that the Fed is making? And man, that's a really big question. That's tough to answer. I do take a look at this every week, every Thursday, by the way. So if you're not a subscriber, we certainly would appreciate your support, and you're going to appreciate the intelligence we give you every single day of the week, Monday through Friday. You can go to www.forwardobserver.com/subscribe and check that out. I think a recession is going to be a lot sooner than 4 years. I would also like to see what this chart looked like, say, in 2006, before the 2008 meltdown. My guess is, just like everything that the Fed and these massive investment banks put out, it's going to change, and it could change here pretty soon, especially if we see some sustained inversions on these yield curves, which I talked about in today's brief. So anyway, as for recession, I think there's a pretty good chance next year. I think historically that's what we're looking at. Some people a lot smarter than me say that the Fed actually is going to engineer a soft landing. Historically, that's not likely, but this is one instance where I would love to be not just wrong, but dead wrong. Also, this is interesting. The Dallas Fed, if we want to switch over to that other image there, the Dallas Fed, just a couple days ago, I just saw this earlier today, is warning about a housing bubble. Here's what they had to say. This is directly from their website. Quote, "But real house prices can diverge from market fundamentals when there is widespread belief that today's robust price increases will continue." Now, end quote, and I'll stop right there. One of the things that I've been talking about in my Thursday briefs is the risk of what's called a price wage spiral. And wages are increasing, and people say, well, I've got money this week, or I get paid in 2 weeks, and the things that I buy might be more expensive in 2 weeks, or they may be more expensive 1 to 2 months from now. So I'll just go ahead and take all the money that I have now and I'll go buy the things that I'm going to need over the next couple of months. And when one or two people do this, it doesn't really matter. When an entire country is doing this because they believe higher prices are going to develop in the future, it drives up demand. And so as you get these wage increases, you get the spiral of price because the more money people are making, the more money they're spending, especially for consumer goods that they're going to use next month or later this year anyway. And if this is kind of what he's talking about, but just applied to houses. When all these people who are trying to buy, first-time home buyers, young families that are having one of the relatively few families having more children who need a bigger house, when there's this fear of missing out almost, and they say, well, I just got to go buy a house because in 1 year it's going to be more expensive, and then in 2 years it's going to be even more expensive, and 3 years we're just going to get priced out. We're not going to be able to afford it. And so this is what this Dallas Fed blog post is about. At any rate, they continue, quote, this self-fulfilling mechanism leads to price growth that may be exponential or explosive, resulting in the housing market becoming progressively misaligned from fundamentals. So this is something I've been talking about for a while. Is actually one of the primary components of my economic early warning brief from a couple weeks ago. Kind of on a similar topic next week, we're going to look at what's happening in commercial real estate, because I think there's also a commercial real estate bubble. And I think we're going to see some fallout from that as interest rates rise, because servicing this debt becomes cost prohibitive for some people. Eventually it will. All right, we have a few minutes left here. I'll go ahead and take some questions. If you want to drop your questions into the chat, certainly would be happy to answer them. If not, I'll think about something else to talk about, which we got a lot to talk about. Oh, by the way, yeah, I've been looking at physical silver prices, and I noticed, by the way, this is not a shout out for them necessarily. Oh, by the way, guys, I made a massive mistake the other day. I meant to talk about this at the top of the show. I made a very, very bad mistake. There's a YouTube channel called Monkey Works, and they have been giving us Monkey. I don't know his first name. I think he goes by Monkey, but every day he's got a very interesting show that he does every day, and he goes into a lot of things. I think one of the coolest things he does is he looks at the ADS-B transponders from planes, and he tracks aircraft over the United States. And actually it's very interesting because he is able to identify patterns. He's been doing this for such a long time. He's identified a baseline, and he is able to every day look at any kind of deviation from the baseline. And, and it's not just location and, rate of speed and type of aircraft and stuff like that. It's also altitude, which potentially has important intelligence value. I should just say it has potential intelligence value. At any rate, man, I need to give a big shout out to him because he's been talking about our work in a very positive light. We certainly appreciate his support over there. Go check him out. It's Monkey Works with an X, Monkey Works US. He is on YouTube as well. At any rate, so back to silver and gold real quick. I've been keeping an eye on silver and gold prices, and I noticed Gainesville Coins is, I think they're a reputable dealer. I've not had, other than shipping issues, shipping has taken a little bit of time. And I think part of the problem is they're waiting on deliveries from their suppliers. But Gainesville Coins, coins.com, I noticed that there's an $11, this is when I looked the other day, there's an $11 markup between paper and physical silver prices. And this is nothing new. You're always going to pay for a premium. There's also when I looked last time, there's a $70 markup between paper gold and physical gold, i.e. what gold's trading for on the ticker and what you can actually buy gold for. And it just means that you're paying a premium to own something physical. I know there's a lot of silver and gold bugs. I imagine that maybe the chat's going wild right now. And there's also this movement to bankrupt all these short sellers of silver trying to manipulate the market. And they say, buy physical silver. Eventually, you're just going to buy all the physical silver out, and they're not going to be able to short it anymore because they're not going to have enough physical silver to borrow in order to short in the first place. And so I would just like to remind everyone, this is a very interesting proposition. I'd like to remind everyone that if you don't have physical control over it, you simply I think you have to question whether you own it or not. Let's look at a couple of questions. By the way, Ben and Dustin, thanks for posting these. We'll do a couple questions here to wrap up. Do you think the fall of America will result in a dogpile or multiple invasions? I don't. I probably don't think so. No, I don't think so. Like military invasions from like China. I mean, look, it's a big ocean, man. The Atlantic and Pacific are big oceans, and it's going to be tough to get over here. As far as a military invasion, I don't know. I think we have enough. I mean, you look at these collapsed countries, and especially when the military fractures and all that military equipment just goes to the generals or the colonels or whoever was in charge at the time that says, all right, PFC Snuffy and Sergeant Smith, go over there and grab all this munitions and load it into the truck, and we're gonna go. So I think I mean, me personally, if I were the Chinese, that's not a mission that I would want to undertake, because we are so heavily armed, and I just doubt that they would be able to do it. I could be wrong. Let's see. You've mentioned on the show that you used to know a bit of Russian, and Mike has said before that he was fluent in Spanish and lived in South America. Everyone on the team bilingual? I don't think so. Listen, I wouldn't call myself bilingual. Like, I barely speak English, and I spent several months in Chile, of all places, learning Spanish. And I used to be very good actually at speaking Spanish, but I hadn't used it for so long that it's been deteriorating. But I have been just in like the past couple of weeks, I have been doing this immersion training in Spanish to learn it, because I look at the demographics of my county where I live now, and there's a very large Hispanic speaking population. And frankly, if you live in Central Texas, it's just kind of dumb not to be able to speak Spanish, especially if we're talking about an emergency where maybe I have to communicate with these people. Maybe I find potential allies, and being able to speak the language, maybe I'm able to build some rapport or build some trust that I otherwise would not be able to do. Yeah, I think Dustin speaks some Russian as well. I know how to say a couple of things in Russian, namely "Я не понимаю." "Я не понимаю по-русски." Okay, I don't speak Russian, whatever that is. I can also say I can say "как дела," which is like, "How are you doing?" I can say "холодно на улице," "холодно на улице," which is like, "It's cold outside," and that's all the Russian I know. Will inflation result in the decriminalization of petty crime to consolidate law enforcement? Hang on. Will inflation result in decriminalization of petty crime to consolidate law enforcement to focus on integral points of order? I don't know. It's probably situation dependent. Look, if you're in an area where your district attorney doesn't care about charging common criminals, but he wants to charge parents at the PTA meeting for being domestic terrorists, then probably yes. Will the police state expand? I think almost certainly we are going to be living, I'm sure everyone's going to say, we already live in a police state. Well, if you believe that, then like Bachman Turner Overdrive said, you ain't seen nothing yet. I really do think the United States is going to be an authoritarian regime, like probably in the next generation. That's what I think. That could change. Do you think we'll have an outbreak of low intensity conflicts from millions of illegals coming through the border? I don't know. By the way, I don't know if you heard that. It's bring your dog to work afternoon. He's over here groaning because he can't go outside. You think we'll have an outbreak of low intensity conflict from millions of illegals coming through the border? Well, I would say, tribal warfare, gang warfare, that's potentially could be classified as tribal warfare, certainly is low intensity conflict. And so I don't see why not, in areas, I'm sure it will contribute to it. I would have to look at the specific situation to know. All right. I'm just seeing a couple things here. All right. Uh, uh, Michael says that there's 24 turkeys ready for the freezer. Nice. Um, how does Taiwan invasion timeline play into worsening demographics in China? Yeah, this is something that I think Peter Zion talks frequently about is that demographics in China are not good and they can't, I mean, they just don't have the ability to sustain heavy losses because well, I mean, they have the same problem that the United States has. They have a large amount of older people, and they just don't have enough younger people working to keep production up and keep the country going. And so, if you have a scarcity of young people, the last thing you want to do is go kill off all your young men in a very costly, high intensity war. So, I think I mean, obviously, that's another thing trending against China, and I think that's one of the reasons why Peter Zion is against is not is bearish on China because eventually that population inversion is going to collapse China. And it's interesting because my probably maybe one of the smartest men I've ever known. He's a CW5, Chief Warrant Officer 5. Not too many of those guys in the Army. He was my section OIC officer in charge. And I remember him telling me one day that China was going to collapse. China was going to collapse. And this is back actually when we were in Iraq in 2008, 09. And he told me that China was going to collapse before we could get to fight a war with them. And, probably not too right now, but an interesting to consider. All right. Yeah, we'll do like one more question or comment. David says China's problem isn't a lack of young men so much as a lack of young women. Yeah, I mean, there's like 1.2 or 1.3 men for every one woman. And that is a problem for a lot of those young men. But China's real problem absolutely is just in general a lack of young people. So, all right. Yeah, who are the 35 Russians the State Department went to Mexico City for? I don't know. Maybe Dustin knows. My dad asked me the other day. He's like, "Hey, what did you hear about that thing where some they're flying planes all over the country and distributing people all over the country and like I forgot exactly what the story was, but I didn't hear anything like that, and I have no idea. But I still don't know what it is. And I googled it. I looked for it for a while. Still couldn't find it. Maybe it was over on Breitbart or something like that. I don't know. Maybe I should go check over there. But all right, gang. Listen, I think that's just about to do it. That flight was removed from the records. Yeah, I'm not surprised I didn't find it on Google. I didn't really expect too much to find it on Google. But I think Breitbart or somebody big covered it. Okay, Monkey Works talked about it yesterday. I'll go and check that out. Yeah, everyone go over and watch that show and get the scoop on what that was. All right. Dustin says that more Russian spies in Mexico than anywhere else. All right, great. Dustin, are there more Russian spies in Mexico than in the United States?
So that was according to some unnamed senior U.S. defense official. But Mexico's President Obrador, he came out and said he brushed off the comments. There was an AP story on it from about a week ago, but I haven't been able to find much other information. I mean, it stands to reason there's close cooperation between intelligence services and some of the transnational criminal outfits that operate in the region, but like we primarily focus on their ties to the Chinese.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, AMLO. Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador. Yeah, he said the other day that he's the victim of an attempted coup, like a media led coup. Russians in Mexico City. That's interesting. Well, let me think about that. All right, gang. Well, that does it for today's afternoon. I don't know what do. It's kind of like a PM update, afternoon update. I don't know. We'll keep doing them. We'll be back in your inbox if you're a subscriber. to the daily SA, which you can get for free, or early warning, which is our paid intelligence report. You can subscribe over at www.forwardobserver.com/subscribe. We'll be back in your inbox tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Dustin will be anchoring the daily SA and early warning show. I'll be back on for the Euro PM update tomorrow afternoon. Haven't settled on a time. It'll either be 2 or 3 p.m. and eventually it'll be permanent there. All right. So until next time, be well and stay out front.